FM.
So we've got Bob on the other side of my screen. He's a Boccia England coach. So thank you very much for coming on, Bob.
It's a pleasure. No, it's a pleasure. I've heard a lot about these podcasts and pleased to be part of this one.
We should just make one thing clear to the listeners and viewers. Bob is one of my current coaches as well. We get on fairly well, don't we, Bob?
Well, 3-hour session, we tend to get about an hour's boccia done. So, yeah, we get on really well.
Definitely. And so tell us, Bob, about your sports upbringing.
Oh, blimey. I think the first sport, what happened was my brother, bless him, he wanted to go fishing. And of course, me being 2 years younger, whatever Paul did, I did. But my mum said, no, if you're going to go fishing, you've both got to learn to swim. So the first sport we were involved with was swimming at the local pool. Obviously, from there, we went fishing. However, swimming became the first coaching that I was doing. I was a swimming teacher to begin with, and then that led into coaching. As you probably remember, most of our sessions I refer to swimming at least once. So I was a swimmer. I went on to coach swimming. I've played basketball. I've played rugby. Little bit of cricket for school, not a lot. Football was not one of my sports. My mum always used to say, Robert, forget it, you've got 2 left feet and you can't control them. So, but I've dabbled in quite a lot. I've done a marathon. I did a lot of distance running. I did a triathlon, which was interesting. Yeah, quite a few sports, but as I say, it's currently boccia, as you're probably aware.
So throughout your childhood, swimming was the sport that you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were never an athlete type of thing? You would never went up to that sort of standard?
No. I swam a couple of years. I swam at the Warwickshire County Championships. But there wasn't any prerequisite qualifying times for that. You just entered and you were obviously seeded according to your entry times. No, I was never, never a phenomenal swimmer. A couple of my old coaches used to say if you'd started as a sort of a 10-year-old rather than a sort of 15, 16-year-old, if you'd started younger, then the size of you could have been quite good, but as I say, it did lead on to the teaching and the coaching, and I mean that built a career. So yeah.
And were your GCEs back then, your A-level, O-levels, or whatever it was, were they more coaching qualifications back then, or okay?
No. When I was at school, I always sort of joke about it, but we had 3 computers. One was in the office, one was in the headmaster's office, and one was in the staff room, and that was it. The students didn't have access to computers. They were, great big beasts. There was no PE GCSE at that time. There was no qualifications. You did PE twice a week, once indoors, once outdoors. And that was it. There was no pathway at that time for PE. As I say, the swimming was different. The Amateur Swimming Association, they ran all the courses you needed to do. So that was where my real qualifications come from, outside providers rather than school.
And if we'll go through your previous jobs for a little bit, you mentioned to me at one point, was it schools and coaching that you did as jobs?
I've done all sorts, yeah. I was a lifeguard that led on to being a swimming pool supervisor in a place called Amersham in Buckinghamshire, which was lovely. That involved teaching as well. We used to do quite a lot of teaching. I've taught in secondary schools, or I've worked, in secondary schools. I was a TA, teaching assistant, for 11 years in a secondary school. Almost on a whim overnight, I decided to go self-employed with a bit of a push from my wife. We were actually going to a Christmas fair, and we were in the car, and she turned to me and she said, right, why don't you resign Monday morning and we'll see where we go from there. And that's what happened. I became self-employed with about 4 hours work a week, which was a bit scary. However, once my name was out there, the work came in. So I've always worked in and around sport, and I've always worked in and around people with disabilities, whether that's physical, sensory, learning, all different aspects of it. But there's always been people with disabilities in and around my work.
And so let's get into this a little bit more, so just to fill in the spaces. So you're a teacher assistant. Was this at a mainstream school, or was it a disabled school?
No, it was mainstream.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mainstream. About 4 miles from where we live, a school called, well, it was the Manor School when I started, but obviously the academy system was brought in, and the head teacher, I think he jumped to academy status rather than being pushed, but that was his choice. So it was a Manor Academy secondary school, but again, my role was to support students with extra needs, special needs, whatever the PC phrase at the moment is. And it was good. I supported one boy for the whole 5 years of his time there, who'd had as a youngster, as a 3-year-old, he'd had an incident with a train. I'll leave your imagination to work that one out. Yeah, so I supported him for 5 years, and then other students, and mostly in PE. So yeah, secondary school, but I have worked in special schools. I've worked 2 or 3 special schools in this area in Mansfield, and where originally in Nuneaton, and when I lived down in North London.
And what was the I was getting to being a tutor assistant? Did you go on a course? Did you have to do qualifications for that? How did you get into it?
No, we moved up here in the October, nearly 20 years ago, and we both decided that we needed to get jobs, but I don't think either of us were looking for full-time work at that point. And I saw it advertised, and I read through the job description, and a lot of the required elements of the job I could tick off. There were some that I couldn't, and I knew that the interview would pick that up. So obviously got the interview, went along, was interviewed by the head, the special educational needs coordinator, and I think there was another member of the senior management team there. And I was taken on as the first ever male teaching assistant in the school, which the Senko, Arena, she said it opened up lots more possibilities for us for support. It meant, because a lot of the boys didn't want the support from females. They sort of felt that it was a bit below them. So I got the job. I did then go on and do a teaching assistant's qualification through local college, City and Guilds, I think it was at that time. I don't know whether they still do them.
Yeah. And so, well, and then you mentioned that you just resigned on the Monday. Was that just did it build up over time that you wanted to leave, or was it just a very sudden I'm going?
No, what had happened was the head teacher that employed me, Jonathan Hickman, who was a smashing, really nice guy, he retired basically, and we got a new head, and she made an awful lot of changes to the structure in the school. And one of the changes was that I was taken out of PE, and at this time I was doing out of 25 lessons a week, 5 a day. I was doing at least 20 in PE. 3 were my prep lessons. There are only 2 of the lessons where I wasn't in PE. And the new head happened to be female. That was by the by. She decided that I was no longer needed, required. She didn't want me in PE and put me in science. And we argued the point that I'd got a back problem, which I needed to be mobile, and sitting didn't help me. I stuck it for nearly 2 years. I'll be honest, it was a lot longer than I expected. And that was when I'd had enough, and Viv had had enough of me having had enough. And she said on that day, why don't you put your notes in? So I'd put it in for the end of the year, the 31st of December, left on that day. And on the sort of January the 3rd, I think it would be, I had a couple of hours work on that day and a couple of hours work a day later, and somebody said, "Oh, you're not at the Manor anymore?" And I said, "No, I'm freelance." "Oh, well, I know somebody that wants a teacher to do some after school sport." And it just went from there to a point where I was having to turn work down because I'd got too much, because you've got to factor in as well, Pete, the travelling. If I'm at school A till 11 o'clock, I can't be at school B much before 12 o'clock. So, but it was exciting, as it says on the television, exciting times.
Yes, and it was a good job you mentioned Viv, because when he said my wife, I was thinking which one, the first one or the second one. I wasn't quite sure. But
second one, no, the first one, no.
Second one.
Viv's was a lot more involved in sport. Obviously, she's not doing so much now for various reasons, but she got involved with Boccia as well, which was great.
Did you meet each other through Boccia then, you and Viv?
No, we didn't actually. We were both working. Well, in fact, we were both swimming teachers, and the irony was, I would do the daytime.
Yeah.
At a particular pool. I'd do the schools and the schools program for the local council, and Viv was working as almost as a freelance swimming teacher and aquasize teacher, water aerobics, all of that. And I would sort of leave the pool at 3 in the afternoon, and she'd come in at 5 in the evening. So although we worked at the same places, we'd never met, and we were both working for a summer play scheme, doing all sorts of different activities. And Viv was lifeguard for the pool that we used. And I went with a group of kids to the pool. I was just there wasn't even there as a lifeguard. I was just there to oversee the kids were okay. And we met, and, we had lunch together and just went from there.
Lucky you.
Very lucky me. Yeah.
And so your main career is happening now. So when did you get involved with Boccia then?
Boccia, it's getting close to 20 years ago. I can't believe it. But I remember it well. I've probably told you the story. One of the members of the PE team, one of the teachers, she said to me, I'm going on a inclusion sports awareness day tomorrow and I've got a spare ticket. I've checked with the Senko and she's okay. Do you want to go? And I said, I'd love to go, you know, get as much experience as I can. And the first sport we did was boccia, and there were 6 red balls and 6 blue balls sitting on the end of this bench. Hadn't got a Scooby-Doo what they were, I'd never seen them. Everybody was looking at each other, and I just by instinct stepped on court and I said, right, why don't we just sit on the bench? There were more than 6 people, so I said, look, just get a ball each. Doesn't matter. I didn't know what the order was, didn't know what the structure was, nothing. And I said, right, first one, throw the white ball and then throw a colour. And I actually went red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, because I didn't know how it worked. And the tutor came up to me, he'd had quite a lot of experience with boccia, and he said, you've done this before? And I said, I've never picked a boccia ball up, never. And he said, you could go a long way in this sport. And bingo. And I went back to school, and the next day I was free in the afternoon. My student was off, he was ill. And I said to Arena, as she said, have you got anything to do? And I said, I've got something I'd like to do. And she said, right, go for it. Went into the PE cupboard and had a rootle round, as you do, and found 2.5 sets of the very old style rubber. Do you remember the outdoor rubber boccia balls?
Yeah,
horrible things, but they had a purpose. And I said to the PE team, I'm going to start a lunchtime boccia club. And the first day I had about 4 kids, and within a month I had to open another lunchtime. I had to have a year 7, 8 and 9 and a year 10 and 11 because I'd got so many kids, and it just went from there. And that was the start. Then we had after school clubs, and we put school teams together, and the school sports development officer based at the school, fortunately Mandy, she said to me, I've put a present in your boccia cupboard. I thought, oh, that's nice. And there were 3, was it 3, 4? Might have been 4 sets of Handy Life, brand spanking new Handy Life balls. And that was it then. That sort of opened the floodgates, and it just went from there. But as I say, never looked back.
And was this when you were doing your freelance schoolwork at that point?
Yes. No, I was at Manor Academy.
Okay.
I was at Manor when I started doing boccia. I'd only been there. I hadn't even been there a year when we went on this one day. In fact, I think it was the spring term that I started. So it was a matter of weeks after starting.
Goodness.
And I did it, as I say, I worked at the school. It was 11 years, all but a couple of days. And when I left, obviously I wanted to carry on with boccia, and I'm thinking this is going to cost me a lot of money, this is. And I said to the then sports development officer, I said, what's going to happen with those boccia balls when I leave? She said, they're going in your car, aren't they? That's what I've been told. I went, really? She said, well, nobody else is going to use them and nobody else is going to want them. And I've still got them and I still use them. So saved me the best part of about 500 quid. So,
how did you progress on? Because it was only 10 years ago or 11 years ago that Boccia England came up. So what did you do before that?
I did all the school stuff. I took the school to schools games at we were based in Nottinghamshire, so it was the Nottinghamshire schools games. We won it twice. We were top 3 5 years on the trot. I went to what is now the BE Cup and the Heathcote Cup. All I knew was that there was a competition in Sheffield on a given day, and I just went along, didn't know anybody, never met anybody, stood and watched matches, saw Nigel Murray play, saw various other players that I now know are at the top of the game or were at the top of the game play, and went from there. Did my level 1 coaches, did my level 2, got invited to join what they called at that time the mega camp, which is where they brought together all the top players. And it just went from there. Every time there was an England camp or an England Lions camp, I'd say to the talent manager, all right, if I come along, yeah, more than welcome, Bob, come along. And it just went from there. So it was really me almost being pushy. Just I knew that I wanted to get certainly to this level, to the England level, hopefully beyond, but that's a little bit more out of my control. That's in the lap of the gods with other people. But yeah, it was just sheer bloody mindedness really, and just pushing my nose in probably where it wasn't wanted a lot of times, but we got there.
You certainly did. Was this when it was CP Sport and Sport
CP
England?
Sport, yeah. Yeah, because as you say, Boccia England is now what it was. They celebrated 10 years, but it must be nearer to 11 now.
Yeah, you would have thought so, yeah.
Yeah. So it was CP Sport, and it was, it was still in its infancy, relatively speaking, even though we were winning. We were doing well at Paras, and we had Nigel Murray, and David Smith was a young teenager in those days. And I mean, yourself, the players that were at that level at that time.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, and Boccia England came along and started to restructure it, and it's just gone on from there.
It certainly has. And so, when did you decide to stop with the school, to go into county competitions? When did you stop with the school?
Well, when I left Manor Academy, when
Okay.
I left the school,
Yeah.
I was no longer connected with a secondary school. However, I then went on to produce teams at quite a few of the primary schools that I worked in, because a lot of my freelance work was primary. They had a lot of after school clubs that needed covering. I got work from my local council, Bullsover, as a sort of a roving sports coach. So my boss would say, we've got a school in such and such that needs an after school club on a Monday. Are you free? And I mean, every school I did, I said to the PE teachers, I'm going to do boccia. What's boccia? And put teams together, took them to the primary school competition. So I was still involved. But as I say, it was having been moved out of PE into science was the real catalyst, although I stuck it for nearly 2 years. And it was just the amount of boccia work that I was getting, not just at the high level. I mean, I was getting, a 6-week gig in a school, an hour a week, or I was traveling to adult day services. I was traveling to special schools, mainstream schools. I worked in one school for only two sessions. A group of happened to be all girls, no boys. It's just one of those things, and they were doing boccia as their GCE selected sport. So I've done all the gambit. But as I say, once I got onto the England Performance Group as an official coach, not just somebody that, not just a nuisance. I said to Viv, I was giving boccia work away to do my after schools clubs, and it's not where I wanted to be. And then obviously we had the pandemic, and a lot of the schools that I was in, even a year after the lockdown had been lifted, they were still not bringing in outsiders. So there was a point where I didn't do it overnight. It was a gradual, I said to the schools, I'm going to finish sort of at Easter, or I'm going to finish at summer, or I'm going to finish at Christmas. And the balance then was the schools gradually decreased and the bocce work increased. I mean, you know yourself, you're one of the players that I coach one-to-one, alongside with Barry, and James was one, and Rachel, and there's a whole raft of names that we can go through.
And so, progression as a coach, you got your basic level 1 qualification with the school. Did you get any more into Boccia England? Because I know Boccia England then created level 2, level 3. So was it with Boccia England you did your level 2 and stuff?
I did my level 2. There is talk of a level 3. They were talking about all sorts of different formats, but as yet, unfortunately, there isn't. However, there are so many other related courses, because yourself from your IAP, your individual athlete plan, there's the technical element, there's tactical element. So there's courses that relate to all of that. So, I'd sort of trawl through the UK sports coaching course website and think, well, that's quite useful. And during lockdown, I must have done, if not more than, certainly close to 100 of these, what they called, help me out here, Pete, not YouTube.
Yeah, there were videos on UK Coaching.
Yeah, they were all sorts.
Tutorials.
They're the things. Yeah, they're the things. But they were always just the one chime. They were always related to my bocce work in some respect.
Okay. And so Boccia England was set up. It opened up for more people to come in. So when did you get your England call up to be a coach originally? Because I know you've dipped in and out since.
Yeah. I suppose the first time it became official, rather than me just turning up for a camp, and working under the support of one of the current coaches. I mean, I had a lot of support and a lot of help from Dan Headley when he was on the EPG. The England Lions squad, I had a lot of help from Liz Moolam and Felicity Nichols. So, ask me the question again, Pete. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
So when did you officially get your England call up to be a coach? Or was the official? It's
probably, I'm going to say 6-7 years now. But again, with lockdown, I mean, we all lost the best part of 2 years, didn't we?
We did.
I mean, we were. I mean, some of my athletes, yourself included, I didn't see you for more than a year, and then when we did go back, we had to do all, thanks for that. We had to do all the medical checks. But yeah, I'd say six getting on for 7 years. That it's sort of been official rather than ad hoc.
Yeah, sticking a nose in. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah, you know what I'm like.
and then you got England call up, and then was it around the same time that you got called up to take over an academy back then as well?
I did. Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I was connected with Knights Academy, and from day one, when the academies were first created, Mark Dolan, Boccia Sheffield, was the lead coach. And, you know, not to decry any of the other academies, but we had a very, very strong cohort of coaches. We had a very, very strong cohort of players. We had a dozen plus players regularly, which means we probably had getting on to 15, 17 players on our books. Some could argue that one or two of them possibly, you know, were not, strictly speaking, academy material, but we worked with them regardless. Mark decided his work was growing. He works in a school, his responsibilities. He decided he was going to give it up. I applied for the role, was interviewed and got the job. I tried to make changes to where the academy was held, etc., and a whole raft of reasons. I don't think we need to go into them now, but a whole raft of reasons. I mean, I can claim to be the only academy lead for Boccia England that never actually got to lead an academy. Which was a bit, you know yourself, Pete, from your experience, there's been a lot of chopping and changing. This is why I said Knights Academy, Mark Dolan, he was solid for 5 years, and then it was just, I think it just got too much for him. But as I say, we went into lockdown, all sorts of things happened.
And then the academies got shut down.
It was, and again, you know, there's a whole load of discussion around that, but
and so so you were full time, and we should just explain the Knights Academy is kind of local to where you were, or you know, around your sort of county. Just explaining for the viewers and listeners listening, so they don't get confused of what the Knights Academy was. But in Boccia, obviously, there's different categories: BC1, BC2, BC3, up to 5. You've got on your books at the moment. So, which is an interesting one actually, because some coaches tend to coach all different types of disabilities, like BC1 to 5. But you've got a whole range of athletes on your books from BC1 to BC5, haven't you?
I have, yeah. For me, I had a feeling there was going to be a question like this. For me, it's just about being on court. It doesn't matter to me whether they're a BC1, you know, on the GB squad, or whether they're a BC1 that's just literally picked up a bocce ball. You know, they'll get the same attention from me. They'll get the same input. They'll get all the same paperwork, relevant paperwork. Obviously, I'm not going to start pushing too much to beginners. People have asked me this before. I'm a boccia coach. You know, I'm not, I'm a BC3 coach, or I'm a throwers coach, or I'm a teams coach. I'm a boccia coach. If the talent manager Andrew says to me, I mean, there's a classic example. We've got a teams and pairs competition coming up in Swansea in a few weeks' time.
Yep.
And I'm responsible for a BC1-2 team, and I'm responsible for a BC3 pair. So I've got the whole gambit there. I've got to be able to cross over from what the BC3s need to what the BC1s and 2s need. I'm just happy to be on court with players.
And you mean next week? This week coming? Swansea.
It is next week. You're right.
Yes.
What, the teams and pairs. Yes, it is. Sorry. Yeah. Because I'm with you this Sunday. We're together this Sunday.
Yes.
And then I'm driving back home from you on Sunday, which I've always said I want to try it. And then me and Viv will travel on Tuesday to Swansea.
Swansea, yeah. Well, by the time this comes out, the competition will have been that week, actually, because this comes out next week.
Okay, yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Just making sure the viewers know is actually just gone. And so So which athletes did you start off with when you became a boccia coach? Which athletes did you have when you first came over to Boccia England?
When I came over to Boccia England, well, and as I say, initially I was attending camps. I had all of. I mean, it would all depend on. I mean, at that time, the lead coach initially, or the head coach was Richard Evans, and then it was Matt Kendrick, and then Matt left to go work for Sport Wales, Disability Sports Wales, in swimming capacity. And I think Dan Headley took over for a short period of time, although he wasn't strictly appointed. It was just that Dan was there.
A cover.
And then then Sandra came in. Sandra King. She did it for a short time. I forgot the question again. This is awful. My memory's frozen.
You're talking about staff, and I was talking about what athletes you had.
Yeah, so sorry, yeah. It would be whoever Richard, Matt, Dan, Sandra gave me, effectively. I did seem, thinking back in answer to your question, it did seem at that time that I was doing an inordinate amount of work with the ramp players, the BC3s. However, when Mark Hoyle came on board, the sort of consultant, if you like, one of the throws coaches decided to resign his position with Boccia England, and Mark rang me on the Friday and he said, "Are you all right tomorrow if you lead the throwers?" Yeah. He said, no, he said, "You'll be fine." So there was no one specific athlete. It was only when it was that Paris TID setup that you were part of before you were reclassified. Yeah. That was the first time when we were all given specific athletes. I think athletes had been asked, or they'd been sort of given coaches, and that was the first time that I started to do the high level one-to-one stuff.
Yes.
But as I say, when I was at EPG camps, England Lions camps, it was whatever I was given, you know.
Yeah, fair enough. The reason why I asked that is because you seem to have an unofficial Bob squad of yours.
Well, we've talked about getting T-shirts printed, but we never have.
No.
Yeah, it's just a phrase that I use just to to encompass the players that are part of it. I mean, at the moment I've got, is it 5 1-to-1s, 6 1-to-1s? I've lost track, no idea. But yeah, it is just an unofficial term.
Yes.
Maybe we should have pin badges made rather than T-shirts. That might be more subtle. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Especially when some other athletes have got other coaches as well. Maybe that might help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're quite high regarded in the boccia coaching world, aren't you? You're quite up there with all the other coaches, and it astounds me that you've never actually made it up to Boccia UK. Actually, although you said that you did a little bit over a few years, and you said if you were in a unrelated conversation, you said if only I was 20 years younger or something, and you might have done that. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, yeah, this is a very difficult subject because as a coach of any sport, even when I was coaching swimming, you always aspire to reach the highest levels. You know, every coach, every athlete wants to go to the Olympics, wants to go to the Paras, the World Championships. You know, that's the pinnacle. am I good enough to be a Boccia UK coach? People have said yes. I sometimes, there are times I think yes, and then there are times I think no. Right. The only thing for me, how much would I lose of my contact with my current athletes if that was, yeah. I'd like the opportunity, I'll be honest with you, Pete, I'd like the opportunity to go to 2 or 3 camps a year. I mean, that is looking more likely with the inception of the talent development squad that Boccia UK have just created, because obviously one of the athletes on there I have connections with, don't necessarily coach them hands-on, but I have connections with, and as a direct result of that, I get an invite to the transition camps, which might be an opportunity for them to see me on court. There's another athlete that I work with, female athlete, that potentially could get selection if BISFED have gone down the route of splitting male and female categories out. So Boccia UK are going to be looking with more intensity at the females. So the opportunities are still there. I mean, obviously, as the years pass, there's a point in time where you think, how much longer am I going to be doing this for? We've had this conversation, 1 minute I'm thinking I can go on forever more, and then another day it's like, oh, can I carry on? But yeah. If the opportunity came around, if Boccia UK came calling and said, look, Glyn's off poorly, or we need another coach because of XYZ, would you be prepared to travel? Yeah, of course. Yeah, not a problem. Just have to wait and see.
You do, and then maybe this video might give them a little push in the right direction.
You never know. Yeah, you never know. I mean, I've done everything I can do. I mean, you're probably aware 2 years ago I was Boccia England's Coach of the Year, which was great. I'm really proud of that. The fact that it was recognised that I'm up there doing the necessary.
You are.
No, it's been a nearly 20 year journey that hasn't yet come to an end. I mean, as I say, I'm with you on Sunday. I've got 2 athletes together tomorrow as part of the teams and pairs training. So,
yep.
But when I'm not on court, I'll be on the side of a pond with a fishing rod in my hand. So.
Oh, you still do fishing then?
Oh yeah, when I can.
Is that a hobby type thing for you now, fishing?
It's relaxing. I get to a point and Viv will say, "Go, Bob, go fishing. Get your stuff and go fishing, will you?" So it's a relaxation. I can sit on the bank. I can think about things. It's like when I take the dog out for a walk. If I'm trying to write a training session and I can't get my head around it and I can't get what I want on paper, I'll take the dog out for an hour or 2. And while I'm out, I'm chatting away to myself. I'm sure people must think I'm doolally. And when I get back home, I think, right, I've got it. I know what I'm doing. So
that sort of explains why your training sessions with me are a bit, because it's a bit of this, a bit of that, and then it's like, oh, he's done this 2 hours later or something. It's always a bit.
Sometimes it can appear to be disjointed, but what I do, I tend to write a session or I type a session. Thank goodness we don't have to do it all by hand. I write a session, and then an hour or so later, I'll have a cup of tea and a biscuit and sit and watch telly, and then I'll think, I'm going to change that, and I change it and tweak it, and by the time I get on courtside with you, it's either a total mess or it all works.
Yeah, that's debatable.
We do chat a lot.
No, we don't chat a lot. No, we don't. No, I think that comes across in this conversation. We don't take a lot. No, but it's nice that you factor into the session. Actually, talk time in this session.
Oh, you got to, haven't you?
Yeah, you got to.
Talk time, tea time, toilet time, all the teas.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And so, we're going to go on to your future. Now, I know your future is probably a bit shorter than everyone else's.
Probably.
But, you know, what's the future looking like for you? I mean, we've had this sort of conversation about maybe retirement, but hopefully that's not to come yet.
Well, I mean, people probably, well, I don't know, people don't realise that comes October this year, I'm 65.
I couldn't believe it either.
You know,
I thought
I can't believe it. Every time I look in the mirror to have a shave in the morning, and I think to myself, you are definitely 65, Bob. You've checked your birth certificate. You are. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I've only got another year before I get my state pension. Now, as you say, I've alluded to retirement. I've talked about, you know, potentially going through to Paris 2024, because that's going to be the August, September of that year.
Yep.
But who's to say in a year's time that GB haven't come calling? So retirement is probably more of a pipe dream at the moment. It's more of a sort of an open-ended discussion.
Of course. Yes.
However, who's to say what's going to happen in the next 12 months? None of us know.
No.
Some days I'm ready to retire. Some days I'm just happy to carry on. And I think when it gets to a stage where there are more days I'm ready to retire and less days that I want to carry on, that's when I've got to seriously think. But at the moment, the balance is in favour of I'm going to carry on.
Yeah. Well, I just have got to so much, not you. So I think it's something to put a pin on, isn't it? Rather than definite. So
yeah,
well,
absolutely.
If only you had 20 more years to come on, you know, who knows? You might have 30 more years left. Who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been instances of coaches. Look at some of the Premiership football coaches. Look at Roy Hodgson. You know,
yeah,
these guys go on to their, you know, late 60s, 70s, mid 70s. I mean, there is a point in time where you've got to bite the bullet and say, you know, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the travelling is not so much. I'll be honest. I mean, when we first had our one-to-one athletes, you know, I was away from home 3-4 days a week, some weeks. You know, now it's probably 2 or 3 times a month.
Yeah, I was going to say, Viv must have been delighted. It was 4 days a week, and she'd go, "Oh, what are you today, Bob?" Oh,
I used to get home, and she'd say, "Who are you?" She still does.
Yes. And so yeah, I mean, I mentioned Viv for a while actually. So you two met you in Newswoman. You ended up being the coach. She's a referee, isn't she, for Boccia England?
She is, yeah. Her refereeing, she's not doing as much. Again, there are reasons behind that. However, I'm pleased that there's always a role in boccia.
Yeah.
For everybody. And one of the roles that Viv's taking on at the teams and pairs that she's not done before, and I think she'll be good at it. She is sitting in the end of the room, so she's listening. She's the call room manager.
Okay.
Now, okay, there's an element of pressure in that job in terms of getting it right at the start.
Of course.
But you know, it's not like you're on court for an hour and then you're off for 15 minutes and then you're back on court. You know, it's a more relaxing job, and if she does well at it and she enjoys it, that's the first thing. She's got to enjoy it. Then, you know, who knows, she may be call room manager more often.
Who knows?
As I say, it's not. It's not to be sneezed at. It's not an easy job. There's obviously responsibilities, but yeah, I mean, she still referees when she's needed to, time keeps when she's needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been in the sport 15 years, and I'd only just got onto the England setup. Viv had been in the sport 5 minutes, and she was timekeeping at the World Championships, David Smith's final where he won, and then she was flag bearer for David Smith. So she's doing something right.
Got to, isn't she?
Yeah,
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, and you've got to behave yourself in front of her now, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of years invested in it, so
definitely.
Just hope it comes across to everybody as being Bob and not somebody I'm not.
Yeah, well, it's a good job you're not being called Robert, isn't it? To be honest.
Well, that used to be my Sunday name when my mum was cross. Robert, come here.
And I'm pretty sure Viv says that to you on a daily basis.
Oh, well. Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
And so that'll be a nice word to finish, actually. So thank you for coming on, Bob.
It's a pleasure. No, it's an absolute pleasure. As I say, I know you've done quite a few of these now, but no, I've enjoyed it.
Voice. Let's go. Voice FM.